Welcome, sentient beings from all known universes and beyond. It's time to activate your cranial downlinks and prepare to receive a raft of discussion on a cosmic ocean of science fiction and fantasy topics, interviews with local area genre devotees, and insightful prognostication by our soothsayers of science fiction, our forecasters of fantasy, and any other beings that happen to get caught in our gravity well. This is the Galactic Driftwood Podcast.
Good morning and welcome to the Galactic Driftwood Podcast. I'm Bill.
I'm Linda.
I'm Seth.
And I'm Chris.
And I've got some blathering droids behind me. Hopefully that'll stop once we get actually into the show here today. But welcome, everyone. We kind of wanted to kick off the show talking about the latest Godzilla movie, which Linda and I had a chance to see this past Thursday. We actually went and saw the black and white version. There was a color version that came out, was in the theaters, and our local Draft House Cinema had a special showing of a black and white version of Godzilla Minus One, which I don't know what you thought about it, Linda, but I liked the black and white. It kind of took me back to the original Godzilla movies.
It seemed very appropriate. It was like,
the
old Godzilla movies. Yeah.
Right. And so this one took place in like 1945. So it's right after the end of World War II. And Japan's pretty much a mess from the end of the war, as you can probably imagine. And it follows the story of a Japanese airman who was a kamikaze pilot, but couldn't bring himself to kill himself. And so on his mission where he was supposed to do the kamikaze dive into a ship, he instead flew to a maintenance island, that's him there, and landed and tried to tell the engineers that there was something wrong with his plane. And so they look at the plane and they say, well, there's nothing wrong with the plane. You're just a coward. And so that night, they hear this horrible noise coming from the shore, and they light up their floodlights and shine it out to sea, thinking it's Allied troops coming in to attack them. And it turns out it's not. It's Godzilla, which at that point, Godzilla is about the size of a T-Rex. So not really that big. I mean, he's a little bit bigger than the guy's World War II fighter plane that he had sitting on the tarmac there. Mm-hmm. And anyway, so they're all hiding in a bunker watching this Godzilla walk around and trying to figure out what they're going to do. And one of the maintenance guys says, well, you've got a 20 millimeter Gatling gun on that airplane. You need to go over there and get your Gatling gun and shoot this thing, kill it. And of course, he's kind of a big chicken. So of course he doesn't want to run out there, but they finally force him out. And so he runs over and gets in the plane, and Godzilla ends up walking right in front of him, right in the target sights of his gun, but he can't bring himself to fire.
Can't shoot him.
And so Godzilla proceeds to move on and rampage the whole tarmac area and the hangar deck, and chews up and kills all the guards except for one.
That was what a chicken shit.
Yeah, well, except for the chicken shit guy and the one senior maintenance guy. They're the only two left come morning. And so it ends up following that airman through the rest of the show.
So I'm going to interrupt for a moment because I have a problem with everybody calling him chicken shit guy. So he's he values life. I get the impression that he's not a guy who just goes out and willy-nilly kills things, because life has a deeper meaning to him, which is unlike, any other Godzilla movie that I've seen. Now, granted, I haven't seen that many because I can't stand them, but Bill talked me into this one, and I'm glad he did, because this was a totally different. It was more about the relationship that he has with this woman that he meets than Godzilla. Godzilla was not like the whole thing in it all the time. There was a lot of other stuff going on, which made this worth it for me.
Yeah. And so anyway, it kind of follows this guy, and he ends up going back to Japan and sort of making a home out of the rubble that he finds where he used to live. His parents were killed. And he ends up running into a woman that has a baby. Turns out she found the baby. It was, had been left alone and was the only survivor of its family, I guess. So she picked it up, and then she ran into him. So it's like the three of them are all pretty much orphans at this point. And they end up taking up residence together. And you see them getting closer over the span of about 2 years or so. And during that 2 years period, you get a little bit of the sense of the Cold War that's picking up between America and Russia. And you see a lot of the nuclear tests in the Bikini Islands. And some of those nuclear tests, as they're going on, irradiates Godzilla. And as a result, he grows to mammoth proportions and gets his signature heat ray and all that kind of stuff from all of that.
It's the typical story. Yeah.
Yeah. And so at that point, he starts
trying to catch him.
Yeah. He starts menacing Japan. And so it was actually pretty good. It's called Godzilla Minus One. And the reason for that is that at the end of World War II, Japan was the lowest it could be as far as morale and, everything. They were just at the bottom of the totem pole because they'd lost the war completely. And when Godzilla came and started rampaging and destroying everything that they had managed to rebuild in those 2 years, they were no longer now at zero. They were at -1. They were lower than low. And it was an interesting commentary on government and government's ineffectiveness at protecting the people. So Japan has pretty much accepted the fact that they can't expect any help from the United States because the United States is too busy countering the Soviet Union to have time to help Japan. And the Japanese government won't even be honest with their citizens about the fact that this Godzilla thing is coming and it's destroying the country, because the government of Japan doesn't want to seem to be ineffective, even though they are ineffective and there's nothing they can do about it pretty much anyway. So at the end of the story, it's actually a lot of these former Navy guys coming together, and they managed to get the government of Japan not to send a bunch of their destroyers. A bunch of their destroyers were supposed to be turned over to the United Nations to be used for peacekeeping stuff at the end of the war, I guess. And so they got the Japanese government to delay that so that these ordinary men that were now just regular citizens could resume their military roles and make these ships effective and go out to sea and try to battle Godzilla. And so they have a pretty good plan for it. And it actually appears to work. I mean, they pretty much blow him to bits, and what's left of him sinks into the ocean. But the core of him, you can see at the end of the film there, you can see just behind the people is the bottom of his foot. You can see 3
How
talons.
big he got. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's like enormous now, right? And but at the end of the film, you can see because of the radiation, his body is starting to regenerate. So there's room for another movie. But it was very good. The plot was really good. Linda, did you liked it?
Yep.
And it's had a
So-
lot of great review online. So that's what kind of prompted us to go see it.
So, Linda, I have a bone to pick with chicken shit. And if he's someone that values life, he basically looked at this creature that he had an opportunity to kill,
Right.
that killed the rest of his
People.
fellow soldiers,
Yeah.
and then later on, grew into probably killing thousands, tens of thousands of people,
Right.
and destroying
Right.
an entire country practically. To me, that's kind of contradicts his view on valuing life. If you have an existential threat to you and yours,
Well,
Right.
you think
Yeah,
you blow
what-
away that creature. I
well,
get
one,
at the time, maybe you didn't think it was that big of a deal, but
one thing that Bill left out is toward the
Hmm.
end, you see him change from something that values life to it's starting to kill people close to him, and he finally gets in his plane and takes the bomb and puts it down the throat of Godzilla and redeems himself in that way. So it kind of
after everyone else already died. But
right. It kind
I'm just
And-
picking on it. It's fine. I get it.
yeah.
Yes. No, and here's the thing though, Linda, that if you recall, when he lands at the maintenance facility and gets out of his plane, his hands are shaking because he was so scared. And when he goes into the plane and he grabs onto the machine gun turret waiting for Godzilla to come into view, his right hand is shaking because he's so scared and terrified. And I think it was more of
Fear.
the fear really than his respect for life. I think maybe later on that may have changed, and
Could
he
be.
may have
Well,
got
later on, he should have felt guilty because he had
Right.
He
Well,
had him
and
in
he
his
did.
sights and
And
that was
Yeah.
the thing. He had he was for those 2 years in between the war and him facing off with Godzilla, he would have nightmares of these maintenance men, accusing him of being a coward kind of a thing, and leaving them to letting them
you
die.
let us down. We died because of you.
Right.
Not everybody's cut out to be a kamikaze pilot.
No,
Yeah,
but
fair
you'd
enough.
think if you were faced with Godzilla, you could at least pull a trigger in self-defense.
Well, and especially if he did. I mean, I get where he looked like a T-Rex, but he wasn't big enough to defeat.
Big enough.
Yeah,
Right.
he wasn't big enough then, and you had the opportunity to let it go, and then it became
Exactly.
damn near impossible. So
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
his mess up, but I guess you wouldn't have a movie if he just blew him away right there on the tarmac.
You know what? I would love to see an edit of that where somebody did that and he got blown away right there in the tarmac, and then it
Yeah.
says the end.
The 5-minute edition of what
Right.
should have happened.
Right.
That would be pretty interesting.
If only he didn't hesitate.
So
So-
kind of toward that, I don't know if they were playing any with it, but there is a theme in the Godzilla movies of people who Godzilla respecting people who also like have this childlike reverence for life. It comes from the kind of weirder
Yeah.
of the movies.
Right.
Like definitely when they were just cranking them out with rubber suits and whatnot. But there's a definite like history of the character responding to humans who like believe in life,
Right.
especially when Godzilla's more in the protector than the destroyer role.
Yeah. There was none of that in this. He was totally just a destroyer Godzilla.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And he didn't care about anybody or anything. In fact, his heat ray in this one was so powerful that it could almost create like the equivalent of a nuclear blast.
Wow.
And so we see at one point the pilot and his girlfriend are in this area where Godzilla's rampaging, and they're part of all the people that are running away. And she falls, and he runs back to help her up as Godzilla's approaching, and the Japanese military has some tanks, and they start firing at Godzilla from this hill area or something. And that's when Godzilla activates his heat ray and creates this devastating equivalent of a nuclear blast kind of a thing. And as the blast wave is coming and they're standing next to the building, the girlfriend pushes the pilot in between a very narrow alleyway between two tall brick buildings. And that saves his life, but the blast just blows her away. And when he comes out from the alley and looks around, it's just nothing but it looks like a nuclear wasteland, right? And so she's dead, and now he's got to raise the kid by himself, kind of a thing. And so that at that point, I think is when he decides this Godzilla thing has to die, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to kill it. And
after she pushed him in, was there like a good solid 2 seconds where they just like made solid eye contact instead of her coming into the alley after him?
Yeah, no, actually, it didn't last that long. She just pushed him, and you see the wave just take her away.
Okay, so there's at least
it was more realistic. Yeah.
Because I mean, Godzilla movies can go one of two ways, I feel. One is the serious and realistic depiction of what it's like to have to deal with one of these giant monsters going around your country, which it looks like this is. And then there's the more campy ones where you've got the high drama of like she would have pushed him into the safe space, and the music would have swelled as they look at each other with "I love you" and "I know what you've just done." And then the blast, he just watches her get blasted away instead of stepping right into the alley like a normal sane person.
Right. Yeah, no, it was definitely the first, the former one of those. And in fact, she shoved him in there with such force that it knocked him over. It might have knocked him out, or maybe it was the blast that knocked him out. I don't know. But anyway, when he came to, he was surprised she wasn't in the alley with him. And that's when he kind of runs out and sees this, the equivalent of a nuclear wasteland where the city used to be. And so, yeah, it was a really good movie. And it's supposed to be out on streaming like July 8th.
July.
That's a ways.
July. It's a ways off.
Way out there.
Yeah.
So you should be able to rent it digitally sooner, right?
Yeah, I would think so.
Oftentimes, but if they say it's not going to be released till July, streaming. Well, since they even did like a color and a black and white re-release, they're probably going to let that sit out there for a while.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Right.
With the color and the black and white, you didn't feel like you missed anything from the film not having it in color at all? I feel like I'd have to watch it.
I didn't feel like we did. In fact, so we went and saw it with Josh Cato, and he had already seen the color version. And so when he found out they were doing a black and white version, he called Linda and I. He's like, "Hey, we're going to go see it. You guys want to go?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we'll go check it out." So we went, and he said, "Yeah, it was equally as good," but he said he recommended that we, watch the color one when it comes out, and to see what we think. But I liked it. To me, it felt like one of the original Godzilla movies,
1954 OG release kind of thing.
Right.
It was like, updated with, modern storytelling techniques and modern special effects and everything. And I thought it was very effective, and it really immersed us in the original Godzilla. And of course they had the, unlike some of the Godzilla movies that come out, they had the original Godzilla theme song playing when he's attacking,
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So, it was really good. Really liked it. So I can't wait for it to come out on streaming or
so this is, did they leave any, we mentioned, they basically take him down near the ending, but did they leave it open at all to continue this?
Yeah,
because that's been a theme lately with a lot of the different reboots that we've had.
They did because, and spoiler alert here, the pilot the pilot finds that his girlfriend actually wasn't killed, but she's kind of been, she was severely injured and she was in a coma in the hospital all this time while they're battling Godzilla. And so he finds out that she's still alive. And so they and the child all reunite in the hospital at the end. So right before you see Godzilla's corpse sinking into the ocean and starting to pulse and regenerate.
Yeah.
So
all of a sudden you see this,
Okay.
and then it ends right there, and you're like, "Oh, I knew it."
And that's what I would have figured. They would have gone something like that. A lot of them have, and so for anyone listening to this podcast, just kind of give you perspective. We've had well over 50, 60, 70 years of Godzillas since 1954. Being, I believe, their original, but it looks like I'm looking at a list of about 38 Godzilla films. And I am a youngin', so I really didn't get my first Godzilla till like the late 90s, which was one of the reboots that had like Matthew Broderick and 2001. And actually, because that was my OG one, that one is still kind of one of my favorites. But I did end up going back watching some of the older ones that were made because in high school I actually have a friend who still to this day is probably the biggest Godzilla fan I've ever met. Goes through all the films, goes in, he's got huge collections of Godzilla type memorabilia and everything. So if there's ever a Godzilla convention or you're meeting people who are creators, like he's there. So he introduced me to some of the other ones to go through and see, and some of them, to your point, Seth, people running around in rubber suits, kicking over plastic buildings or whatever, was kind of like how it was. But there was, even in the cheesiness, there's something to that. But in the last, 10, 20 years, we've gotten these kind of semi-okay reboots.
Right.
The last one probably being better, obviously, than the 1998 Godzilla that we got. But here we are with another Godzilla Minus One. Yeah. And it's like, are we going to run this in parallel with, the Godzilla vs. Kong that we have coming out?
Right.
I believe this year. We have this weird array of Kong, or not Kong, but Godzilla universes, right? So let's just spin up another one. Are we okay with that? Are we not okay with that? I don't know how I feel about it. I don't like the direction that ultimately the Godzilla vs. Kong, I think, is going. But at this point, I've had so many Godzilla arcs. I'm like, wait, which one has this and which one is not?
So, and in the one that's coming out, Godzilla and Kong team up against like a Super Kong.
Which would be weird, I think. Like they're getting to the point where they're flying off the handle, right?
I mean,
jump from the shark.
The Godzilla movies have always gone that way when they go that way, because like some of the movies got really silly, and this just seems like more in that vein.
Comical to me, I agree. Yeah,
but I think, Chris, kind of to your point, there's really two different Godzillas. There's the Japanese Godzilla, and then there's the Godzilla that's marketed, that's been adopted outside Japan.
The Godzilla franchise.
Yeah. So, like, Godzilla, the first one, 1954, like, the movie, the franchise was all kind of a cultural touchstone around the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and just the cultural dealing with that as a culture.
Yeah.
And that no one else on Earth knows that kind of the trauma that goes along with, that went along with that, and then the decades and the continuing health problems afterwards. It's just a scar that Godzilla was part of the healing, I think, which is why you've got. I'm really interested now to see Godzilla Minus One, because I think it's really getting back to that core of the Godzilla story.
Yeah,
and that's why I think it's different. than the Godzilla that's been the other Godzilla franchise that's run really big, because that one is just pretty much big monster hits each other with
Right.
maybe some more modern story elements thrown in.
Yeah.
But Godzilla Minus One is getting back to the actual cultural core of the entire character and telling,
I would agree with
kind of retelling that story with modern movie making techniques and storytelling.
That's what it sounds like. So I probably, personally, I probably watch both the color and the black and white. Probably the color, because for me, I'd expect to watch it in that form.
Sure.
But I do have an appreciation for the fact that they did a black and white.
Yeah.
I think is maybe a little bit more of a tribute or a throwback to Seth's point there on getting back to the original kind of message of it. And I think it's a better maybe repairing of what the original film was back in 1954, as opposed to what it is now, which largely ignores anything going on in Japan, or the timing of why Godzilla exists and those nuclear tests and what those implications were for Japan back during the war. So I think the timeline of it is actually pretty interesting too, because you mentioned this one takes place right around or after World War II. So
1945 is when it starts out. Well, because you see the first frame of the film is the pilot, eschewing his kamikaze duty and escaping to land on a maintenance island nearby where the fight was taking place. So, I mean, the war's just still finishing up. So,
but and from what Linda said as well, with the movie focusing more on characters, that also it's been a real long time since I've seen the original Godzilla. Like, Chris said the first one you saw was Matthew Broderick's in the 1990s. I think I was watching these. I remember watching these with my cousin in my cousin's basement when I was like 8 and 10 years old on Saturday mornings.
Yeah.
And we just watched these things. So like those were way more goofy, and I don't remember if I clocked the original as the original, but I'm having a feeling that if we watched the two, we would find a lot of similarities. And I'm really curious to actually maybe watch the original and this one.
Yeah, it was maybe 2 years ago, I think, that the Alamo Draft House had the original Godzilla film. So when the original Godzilla film was released here in the U.S., the distributor edited it, and they cut out a lot of it and inserted scenes with Raymond Burr so that it could be more Americanized for American audiences. And so it was nice to see the original version without Raymond Burr and how that played out. It was quite different. It was much more, the message of anti-nuclear, anti-war kind of thing. Was a pretty heavy message in the original, and that got diluted quite a bit with the Raymond Burr version, because of course at the time that was released, the U.S. was actively developing its nuclear weapons, and they didn't want any anti-war sentiment, so that needed to be watered down substantially for the U.S. audiences.
I mean, I feel like a lot of the media that we would have seen from other countries around that time, probably through the 90s, was all heavily edited for American audiences.
Yeah.
Like Chris and I know that you even up through the 2000 and today even, they're still changing anime series to fit our specific weird cultural things so that they're more successful.
Yeah, down from narratives down
or
to just
editing out the weird Japanese things that don't fly anywhere other than Japan.
Just edit it out completely, change an entire dialogue, the whole thing. So there's a lot of anime series that I've had to go hunt down original stuff, and I'll be watching it through, and I'm like, wait, I don't recall that ever happening. I was like, oh well, I had the edited Americanized version initially.
Yeah, one of the original series of Sailor Moon, a couple
Yep,
of the
that's
Sailor
one.
Scouts were a lesbian couple, and when it came over to America, they were cousins. Really,
Yeah, it's no longer
really
a thing.
close cousins.
All right.
So,
Well,
yeah.
well, good. So I recommend if you haven't already seen it, get out there and see it. If you have seen it, let us know in the comments section what you thought, what you liked. And we'll be back next time with some more interesting commentary of things that are going on in pop culture. I think we're going to be talking about VTTs, aren't we, Seth?
Yeah. Or AI, whatever we want to talk about.
Right.
Virtual tabletops for the uninitiated.
And one quick question before we go. Does anybody know how many Godzilla movies this makes with the release of the current one?
59?
37. Seems
remember.
like 59 sometimes when you're watching.
I misremembered the number you had said earlier.
Yeah, I brought it up earlier on the list. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I knew it was something 8, and I was guessing 58, and it was 38. Oh, well.
All right. Sounds good. Well, we'll see you all next time. Thanks again for tuning in. Take care. Bye-bye.
Later.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Galactic Driftwood Podcast. For more information and past episodes, please visit our website at galacticdriftwood.space or subscribe to us on YouTube. And now, please deactivate your cranial downlinks, collect your towels, and be sure to watch your step as you exit our gravity well.